Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the Old World. Today we're going to have a follow-up look at the Old World Almanac, and in particular we're going to explore the UGO-IGO element of the turn structure. The question here being, is sticking with UGO-IGO a missed opportunity? What do I mean by this? Well, traditionally, Warhammer Fantasy has been largely a UGO-IGO game. You have your turn, I have my turn. We have a player who goes first, a player who goes second. And in multiplayer games, a player who goes third, fourth, fifth, whatever the case may be. And that's how it's always been, with, I think, a possible exception of some of the magic rules in early editions where mages were throwing spells at each other at broadly the same time. But that is largely the exception, which proves the rule. But there are other systems out there, ones which aren't strictly UGO-IGO. Maybe they work off initiative, maybe they work off orders and drawing counters and things like that. There's different ways of doing it, which give you different levels of interaction between the players and the armies on the tabletop during a particular game. Now, UGO-IGO has a lot of advantages, which I'm guessing is why a lot of games, including Warhammer Fantasy, utilise this system. For a start, it's straightforward. If it's your turn, it's your turn. You know what's going to happen, and you're not really going to get interrupted whilst you ponder, whilst you shuffle your units around, take your shots, etc. And this is also something that's good for competitive play. Now, whether Warhammer Old World will become a competitive game with a competitive scene, I don't know. But looking at sort of the balanced data sheets and the like Games Workshop have produced for 40k and Age of Sigmar, they are taking a lot of their input from results in competitive environments, from tournaments. And as tournaments move more towards keeping time and having chess clocks and the like, having a UGO-IGO structure makes this really simple. It's your turn, it's your time, and there'll only be brief pauses in that if I have to do some kind of interaction with you. But those interactions are kept to a minimum. An extreme version of this, perhaps if I remember correctly, would be Kings of War, for example, where there is pretty much zero interaction between the players during each other's turn. And then, of course, there's the simplification around the balancing, because if you've not got certain aspects of the game happening more regularly than others, it's perhaps easier to take into account their effectiveness and apply points values to that. So not necessarily having missile weapons going off in my go and your go, and vice versa. So twice in a battle round. So how could the UGO-IGO be a missed opportunity? Surely it sounds so much more straightforward than the other options. But there is a but here, and I think it's worth considering. So a more interactive game, particularly around the movement phase, for example, removes an element of the certainty a player has during their turn. And Games Workshop, it must be remembered, has said that this isn't a game for brand new wargamers. This is a game for people that have been around the block a couple of times, that have experienced games, even if, I suppose, if it's not the old Warhammer Fantasy games. So complexity can be an element of the rules writing. Shifting from a UGO-IGO would allow players, rather than just sitting there and watching their opponents lining up the perfect charges and perfect shots and traps that are looking particularly difficult to escape, can do something about it. They're not purely passive in these sort of situations. And I think this extra level of interaction as well will make it a more of an interesting game with a bit more of backwards and forwards. There's the realism aspect. We've got to remember that real battles are not fought UGO-IGO, and an awful lot of things are happening simultaneously. We only really have a turn structure and phases within a turn, etc., to make our lives easier and to give us a structure to follow. Real war isn't like that. And this brings us on to opportunity, the opportunity for countercharges, and making movements which account for, air quote, reality of advances becoming disjointed. If you move your units in the wrong order and perhaps expose a flank to a unit of heavy cavalry, that unit of cavalry might go flying in and take advantage of that. How does that fit into the realism that I just mentioned? Well, this is where orders are going awry. Units aren't moving at the right pace. They're not keeping together and protecting each other. Someone gets a bit keen, they're a little bit too far ahead, or a unit's a little bit reticent, falls back, creates a gap in the line which can suddenly be exploited by a daring general or local commander. And my final thought on this particular topic is the exchange of fire. So if I go first and I'm particularly worried about that one cannon you've got taking down my monster, but I've got an artillery piece, what I can do with turn 1, particularly if we have the laser-sighted cannon like we had in 8th edition, is blow your cannon off the table before it has a chance to shoot. And if you've got a couple of cannon, maybe I can blow both of them off the table before they have the opportunity to shoot, allowing me to disregard that rock, paper, scissor element of the army building, because I've just taken out the threat to my monsters. They can act with impunity, and suddenly the tools you've got to deal with them are completely gone before you even get to start playing the game. And I have seen battles decided by this sort of turn 1 exchange of fire. I've been on the receiving end of it when you realise you've got very little, because of the nature of your army, to deal with some of the key threats, and they are just instantly removed without any agency from you as a player. So an exchange of fire, simultaneous or staggered UGO-IGO, but within a phase of everyone shooting, gives you at least some opportunity to unload with missile weapons. And again, it perhaps keeps it more realistic, but you're not going to politely wait for each other to shoot. We're not talking about the armies of the early 1700s after all. But how would all of this work? And how would you stop missile fire dominating, or magic, again, dominating play, because it's all going off in your turn and your opponent's turn? Maybe the answer there really is to limit the number of times a unit can activate, be it moving and shooting, to once per battle round. So a unit could try and take an advantage of disjointed enemy movement in order to act during your opponent's turn, but then it wouldn't be able to move again in your own turn. As with that shooting, you can shoot simultaneously with your enemy, or you can shoot in your own turn once per battle round, but it's up to you as to when those shots are fired. Is it when your opponent's moved up, or maybe you want to look at the live position, move some of your own units around, and then start taking shots in order to take better advantage of the situation? Systems that use command points, which are used for pretty much all orders and activations. If you're using something like that, well, you can say a unit can operate during the opponent's turn, but actually costs a little bit more to do that, meaning command and control is strained for the rest of the army. So do you want to pay that extra point to launch a cavalry charge in your opponent's turn and try and disrupt an advance, or do you want to hold back so you've got the additional point or two in order to move, shoot, etc. with more things during your go? Now, my own personal view here is I think UGO-IGO is fine as a concept. It's been around a long time. A lot of games use it as their default position, and if it wasn't any good, they wouldn't do that. So is it a missed opportunity? Not fully, but if you're looking at a game for experienced wargamers, if you're looking for something that's not necessarily designed for a competitive environment, and it's meant to be a beer and pretzel sort of game with good interaction, etc., and maybe a bit of realism, for want of a better phrase, when you're talking about a game with giant monsters, magic wielders, etc., then maybe sticking strictly to a UGO-IGO could have been improved upon, but there are absolutely no signs that we're going in that direction, certainly from what we've seen so far. So tell me, what are your views on UGO-IGO? Is it the best thing for Warhammer and Warhammer the Old World? Is it the right direction of travel? Should we be having a bit more nuance within the game? Is it even possible, or would it just cause too many arguments? Let me know in the comments down below. All that remains for me to say is thank you for listening to my thoughts on this particular topic. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.